I grew up in the Beaver Cleaver home. I went to the perfect church that had the perfect members. Or so I thought. My name is Brent Taylor, and this is my God story. From a very early age, my family went to every Sunday morning service, every Sunday night service, every Wednesday night service. I can remember Ms. Brown's second grade class on Sunday morning and Coach Ham's high school classes, where he always told us, if you don't want to be known as a bank robber, don't hang around bank robbers. There were the Sunday night devos, the weekly Truth Search Bible studies during the week, and occasional youth rallies on Saturdays. My dad was a deacon and later an elder. My mom was involved in teaching Bible classes. You see, I was involved in church all the time. Little did I know at that time that those experiences were setting my spiritual foundation. My perfect world came crashing down when I was in junior high. My dad went in for surgery to remove his gallbladder, and they found cancer in his liver. He was not expected to make it 24 hours after the surgery, but by the grace of God, he was around for another 18 months. God finally took him home on the first day of my sophomore year in high school. How's that for starting off a school year? Not only had I lost my dad, but I had lost my best friend. I was very fortunate to be a part of a one-of-a-kind youth group. We did everything together. Our parents never had to make more than one or two calls to find out where we were. But the flip side of that is we generally knew where our parents were because they were generally always together. They are what I call the original small group. Even today, they still get together, some 50 years later. My mom is the one in the white with her eyes closed. It was not until I got to college at ACU that I realized what a special group we really had. I was talking to one of my closest friends a few years ago, and she asked me, do you ever remember us being tempted with going out and getting drunk or smoking pot or any of those things that we shouldn't do? I told her, no, I don't. She said that she didn't either. And we both decided it was because the people in our high school class knew our group, knew who we were, knew what we stood for, and knew that they'd be wasting their time. She went on to say that she kept waiting for her kids to have the same thing that we did, but it never happened. While in high school, I thought I had everything. I had the best friends you could ask for. I had the best part-time job working as a DJ at KSNY Radio. My dad was the manager of the radio station. Shortly after his death, they called and asked me if I'd come to work for him, which I jumped all over. I was part of the best marching band in West Texas with, at that time, 25 consecutive Division I's in marching and about that many in concert. I was part of the only basketball team from Snyder High School to make it to the state tournament, where we ended up getting second. Even to this day, I can still remember crying in the locker room after the final game, telling my coach, and later my mom, that I saw outside the Superdome, as it was known at that time in Austin, and just telling her and my coach, I just wish my dad could have been here to see this. In hindsight, there is no doubt in my mind that if I didn't have a strong spiritual foundation at a very young age, I probably would not be standing here today. While attending Abilene Christian, I started to question some things that I was taught that growing up, like, where does it say in the Bible that you have to meet every Wednesday night? I started realizing then that things that I was taught, or at least came across to me as scriptural, were actually traditional. or tradition. And we'll leave that for another discussion. You know how some people graduate college, magna cum laude, summa cum laude, all those fancy Greek words, or at least I think they're Greek? Well, I graduated come sooner or later. But I did graduate and started my business career. My first job was back in Snyder at the Snyder Daily News selling advertising. I also worked for the radio station at that time doing a lot of sports broadcasts. A year and a half later, I was sent to Littlefield, Texas, which is not too far from Floydada, we heard about last week, to be the publisher of the Lamb County Leader News, which is a twice-a-week newspaper. I often wondered why Littlefield, but it didn't take long for a girl to approach me at church one night and invite me over for supper. I went on the wrong night, but she said that was okay and told me what night to come back. Long story short, that girl has continued to tell me what night for 28 plus years. That's why God sent me to Littlefield. A few years after getting married to Deshauna, we wanted to have kids. Actually, Deshauna really wanted to have kids. And I was like, okay, when it's time, it will happen. Deshauna became very angry with God. And hopefully one day she can come up here and she can tell that part of the story. We saw these teenagers having kids who had no business with kids, and yet we couldn't have any. So we decided to go the adoption route. We had done all the paperwork and home studies with Christian Homes of Abilene, and we're waiting for our baby when, you guessed it, we got pregnant. On July 5th, 1992, after spending all day at the Littlefield July 4th celebration and listening to Waylon Jennings in concert, Joshua decided to make his grand appearance. At this time, in addition to my duties with the newspaper, I'd also become an EMT. And when you have about 20,000 additional people in a town of 7,000, we had all hands on deck. And Deshauna was in a golf cart a lot that day, bouncing around the fairgrounds. And she says that's probably what caused everything to start happening. About 11 o'clock at night, after we'd been out all day long. One little tidbit. Waylon's mom went to church with us in Littlefield. A few years later, we decided we didn't want Josh to grow up as an only child. Based on history, we figured we would have a hard time getting pregnant again. We now say that God got tired of hearing us pray for another kid and said, okay, you want kids? I'll give you kids. How about a set of quintuplets? Needless to say, our lives have not been the same. The last 19 years have been anything but normal in the eyes of the world when it comes to our family. We were told when they were born that ours were the 43rd set of quintuplets in the United States and third set in Texas. But in our lives, this is a normal life. The kids were born in September, and it was not until November that we started bringing the kids home. 2 one week, 2 another week, and 92 days later we brought home Alexi, who at birth was 1 pound and 3 ounces. I actually have a picture somewhere. I've lost it. I've got to try to find it. Of this ring on her arm. It looks like an oversized bracelet on her arm. And you can tell I don't have real big fingers. We brought Alexi home on December 19th, which is also our wedding anniversary. So that was a special day that we had all 8 of us under the same roof for the first time. So because of the time of year with flu and other winter-type bugs going around, we didn't get the kids out very often. We knew we wanted to raise our kids in a good church. I can still remember the Sunday morning we decided we would take the Quints to church for the first time. Like a lot of things in our lives, we decided on Sunday morning that we would get the kids out for worship. We called a friend over to the house to help us get everyone ready. We walked in the building during the first song and found an empty pew toward the back and made our way in. After the song was over, the song leader, Bob Martin, I'll never forget this day, he said something to the effect of, "This is indeed a red letter day. The Taylors have just walked in with the Quints." I think we felt more like a freak show in a circus than a family at church. Today we have 6 kids, a 23-year-old son and 5 19-year-olds, 3 boys and 2 girls. In hindsight, the terrible twos were not terrible at all. But the teenage years have been a completely different story, and at times has made loving them very tough. The shot of jokes about writing a book and titling it, "Teenagers Are from Hell." Our oldest,
That's what I'm talking about.
Our oldest son, Joshua, was a cross-country long-distance runner in high school and was very good. In fact, he was so good that he was awarded a track and cross-country scholarship to Highland Christian, but forgot to take care of the books and go to class and ended up losing his scholarship and being put on academic suspension. Not probation, suspension. Let's just say that his GPA, you hear people with all the 4.0s, well, his definitely had a 0 in it. Let's just say it was more than 1 0. All I could think of was, why? Do you not know that you have just thrown away a scholarship with a college degree? Needless to say, I was a little hot under the collar. As the Quints started high school, 4 of the 5 got into smoking pot during their freshman year and even experimented with stronger drugs. One night, Kennedy came home, was obviously high on something. My wife and I started talking to her and asking her for her cell phone, and the fight was on. And I literally mean fight. I ended up trying to pry her fingers off the phone and ended up having to yell for Joshua to come help. After being bit and Josh being punched in the eye by Kennedy, I decided to call 911. Long story short, Kennedy was arrested, spent the night in jail. She still didn't learn from her lesson, as a few months later she was picked up again for marijuana possession and spent another night in jail. In addition, Kennedy identifies herself as a lesbian, which is another story in itself. Fast forward to their senior years. About a year and a half ago, to be exact, I got a message on my phone while I was at work from a friend of ours who just happens to be a detective with the Forney Police Department. The first thing he said to me was, "I guess you know we have Jonah in jail," which I knew nothing about. He went on to say he and some other officers were at the house to pick up Zachary. It turned out the 2 of them had been sneaking out of the house at night and had been breaking into and taking cars for joyrides and breaking into garages. They were selling the stuff they stole to support their marijuana habit. I hope none of you ever have to go to jail to visit your kids. One of the worst things I have done is talking to my kids through plexiglass, seeing them in shackles, in handcuffs. They asked us to bail them out of jail, but we did not. Talk about tough love. We had told all our kids, you do something to get yourself put in jail, you're going to stay there. We will not bail you out. And we didn't. They spent 3 months of their senior year in high school in the county lockup. These pictures, these last two, probably hurt me more than any others. You see, we tend to sweep family secrets under the rug a lot of times. But when you have your family plastered all over the news, or in this case, the internet, it's kind of hard to hide. Then there's Jacob. We knew he had also been dabbling in drugs. We also knew he had been diagnosed with major depression and had attempted several unsuccessful suicide attempts. Then we found out he was gay. On at least 2 occasions, I received calls from the police department asking me to come pick him up because they had found him with another guy. The other guys had warrants for their arrest, so they had to do something with Jacob. What we found out was that Jacob had hooked up with the guys to exchange sex for money so he could support his drug habit. By this time, Jacob was into meth. Alexi has thankfully given us no problems like the others. She graduated in the top 15% of her class, but in reality, she has given us some issues too. You see, she has told us she is not sure if she is agnostic or atheist. That statement hurts just as bad as seeing your kids in jail. All of our kids were raised in the church, and I've had the privilege of baptizing all 6 of them. So what has happened with our kids, or as one famous radio announcer used to say, now for the rest of the story. Josh ended up back at home for a year, worked 40 hours a week as a unit secretary at a hospital, and at the same time took 12 hours of online courses for 2 semesters, and was accepted back to ACU. He finally realized that if he stayed at ACU, he would be in over his neck with student loans and returned home. Today, he is working as a plumber's apprentice and absolutely loving it. I told him, I said, you stay on this route and you can be making loans to students. Even though we had our doubts whether we would ever see it or not, all 5 of our kids did graduate and walk at the same time. And actually, obviously an older version, but I had a picture of all 5 of them in their caps and gowns sitting at graduation. Like I say, we never thought it would ever happen. Kennedy, in the yellow, has finally straightened up her act and is working at Walmart. She has also started taking college. Zach, in the blue, is working at a pizza delivery company in Forney, and he's also taking some college hours. Jonah, in the green, is working for a road maintenance company and is also taking some college hours. Both Zachary and Jonah received 5 years of deferred probation. Back in December, Zach did get arrested for public intoxication after drinking a bottle of cough syrup and being found passed out in his car. But since then, he's been doing really well and staying clean. He has a court date later this month, at which time we will find out if he will have to spend time in jail or get probation again. And obviously, we're hoping for the probation. So if you would remember him in your prayers and pray for leniency for Zach. After graduation, Zach saw our detective friend who also had a kid in the same class, and Zach went up to him and told him, "Thanks for arresting me." I would be willing to bet that not many police officers have ever heard that statement before. As of today, Jacob, in red, has been in 3 residential treatment centers for depression, 3 different stays in drug rehabs, and has now been kicked out of a sober living facility twice, and as of this week, kicked out of a rehab vocational program in South Carolina. He told his mom he just doesn't want to quit meth. The deal we made with him prior to going to South Carolina was that in order for him to be able to live in our house, he had to finish this 4-month program. He barely finished 1 week, and therefore is now homeless in South Carolina. We did get a call from him last night, so we at least, as of last night, know he's alive. But Deshauna said he sounded very confused, so obviously we know he was probably high. He also continues to struggle with same-sex attraction. It is, and I believe always will be, a day-to-day situation with him. As bad as this next statement's going to sound, it's the way that we honestly feel with Jacob right now. And that is, the next time that we see Jacob, he will probably be in a body bag. Alexi is also working at Walmart and continues to have nothing to do with church or a relationship with God. I've often asked myself, where is God in all of this? And at the same time, I've also asked, what do you do when prayer is not enough? So you might ask, how have we survived all of these crises? 2 groups, Highland Oaks and a ministry we're involved with called Higher Ground. God has put these groups of fellow Christians in our lives, and many of them have gone through some of the exact same things that we are going through now. A couple of years ago, our spiritual life was stagnant at best. We both felt we needed to make a change in where we were worshiping, and decided we would start visiting other congregations. We had decided that we would check out one of the churches in Mesquite. On Saturday night, Shauna rolls over. We were already in bed. She rolls over and she says, "Hey, why don't we go to Highland Oaks in the morning?" See, there she goes telling me what to do. So I reached over, picked up my phone, pulled up Highland Oaks website to see what time it was started. We walked in the building on that next morning. We've been here ever since. We had heard of Highland Oaks and had some really good friends, Rusty and Elaine Abrams, which I know a lot of you know. And I keep joking with Rusty that we had to wait for them to move to Oklahoma before we could come to church. Higher Ground is a ministry started by a couple of churches of Christ in eastern New Mexico back in the early 2000s. Deshauna was invited to attend the first climb, if you will, in Ruidosa several years ago by a friend in Lubbock, and I went on my first climb back a year ago, February. Since then, Deshauna has gone back as a speaker several times, and I've also spoke too since then. While at my climb in Ruidosa, I was approached by the president of Higher Ground Board, some of you know, a guy named Larry Tittle, about seeing if I would start a new retreat in the East Texas area. I have a hard time saying no, so I told him, I said, okay, I will help form a team so that we can start spreading this ministry. I am proud to announce that Higher Ground Lake Country was kicked off last month with a very successful men's climb, and 2 weeks later, a very successful women's climb. If you would like any more information about that, please see Deshauna or myself. You could also see Dan and Judy. They were both at the last one. Roger also is familiar with this and was there as well. Have you ever been on one of these before and wanted to get off? That describes our life right now. Needless to say, our lives have been a roller coaster as we continue to ride it. With 6 kids, and both of us with successful nursing careers, we know we can't stay down or get too high. To kind of illustrate one last story, we were dealing with some of the issues with the kids one day. We were down that low, and at the same time, here comes Alexi walking in the house to tell us, "Hey, I'm in the top 15% of my class." So you go from a low to a high on a dime. And that's been kind of the way our life has been. If you haven't heard anything else that I have said, please hear this. Satan is alive and well and are attacking our family from all sides, and I will not let Satan win.
Amen.
God has a plan for Deshauna and I, as well as our kids, and for you too. We don't always know what the plan is, but with faith and with the grace of God, we can handle anything the devil throws at us.
Amen.
Amen.